If you go and have a look over on Trucking Sound's YouTube channel, he's done a little episode on his new build of a fire truck. Here is the beast. He took it to Lombardo's, Sean, who inspected it over the pit, and they discovered the chassis was rotten. Just completely crumbling. Welcome to the start of a new week at TTHQ. I'll be continuing the fire truck escapade. Pump's coming off, that's gotta go. And then the big plan, cut the chassis, get that lot gone. But what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna talk you through my process of how I do these. So professionally, I used to extend and reduce wheelbase chassis for brand new vehicles. So if the dealership's got a stock full of certain wheelbases and the customer wants a longer wheelbase or a shorter wheelbase in their stock, they have a different one. They used to have me alter it. So I have done hundreds, if not in the thousands, of wheelbases. So I do know quite a bit about what I'm doing on these, but so I will go through the process. Obviously I was working on new trucks and they're a lot nicer to work on than dirty, oily, manky old fire trucks. Chassis rails I got from Nipper. I believe they were the Digger Girls' old chassis rails off her rigid. Believe it or not, no matter what everyone says and tells you, oh, it should be notched out when you do a chassis join, it's incorrect. I do follow the bodybuilders guidelines, and they do tell you straight cuts, 30-degree bevels. I agree, you'd think a tapered cut would be stronger or a step notch cut would be stronger, but it turns out if you do a straight cut and you V it correctly, bevel it, V it, weld it, grind it, root it, cap it, no problem. Just having a little rant there about, I mean, everyone thinks that it's best to do it this way, that way, that way. I do it for the reason of I follow what the manufacturer says, and manufacturer on this, it's a straight cut with 30-degree bevels. So that's what I'll be doing. Looking at these chassis, they are shorter than I'd like. So what I'm thinking is, on the back end here, this is where the rear box sits of the fire truck. Got a air bottle bolted on the back there, and I have got room that way. So if I move that to there, I can reduce probably 150mm off the back of this chassis, because that pump's no longer needed. So I can reduce 150mm off the back of that chassis, not a problem. I think Ant's going to want a new framework making on the back here anyway, but a drop down framework, so the tunnel in the back of the fire truck where it had the little doors to get to the pump, he's going to have a tunnel full of subs, I think, so he'll want a framework on here anyway. So looking at it, so I can get away with 150mm less there. And then at the front here, I was hoping to join it probably the centre of that cross member. Rot starts pretty much there, so I was hoping to come there, join in the centre there, and then I'll make a new inner strengthening flitch. So what they say is the height of the chassis times by 2 each side of the join, and that's what the inner flitch should be, with the same thickness if not thinner than the chassis rails. I'm going to have to take that cross member out, shorten the width for that, whatever, 2 times the inner flitch. So the inner flitch runs up inside it. I've got to take all the air pipes off, all the electrics back, then I'm going to cut it, and then I can pick this up, move this to the side, so I can use this as a datum to build the new chassis against. So it's going to be build it up, bring parts across, unbolt it off of here, bolt it onto the new one. Time to get this pump off. Let's have a closer look. So it looks like there's the main beam that supports the pump. The pump bolted to that channel, and then there's a plate or an angle welded on the end that sits on top of the chassis with 2 bolts on. So I think if I support the weight of the pump with a forklift, and then I'm just going to disc cut them heads off because the 2 rotten. That side's not too bad, this side's a bit more worse for wear. Disc cut them off, and then I'm thinking I should be able to just pick that off in a oneer. I'll stick that on a pallet to the side. More foaming agent again. Try and keep that to a minimum spillage because it's not the nicest stuff. It dries rock hard on the floor. Right, that's that. And then got to try and work out how to get that out. Also, you see that nuts and bolts top and bottom there. In there. So I've had a change of plan what I'm going to do on here. I was going to take the transfer box out, but I've just made a measurement. So I've got the date and point of that slot. That cross member is going to stay in the front there anyway, and the cut's going to be more rearwards of that. So that's going to stay in there. So I've took a measurement from the edge of that slot to centre line of that rear cross member, which is 3 meters 480. I just didn't want to forget that measurement because that's the most important measurement of them all. So 3 meters 480 mil. Technical drawings isn't my strong point, I'll admit that now. So I can cut this wherever I want. Now, the problem I've got is all the bolts and everything are all too tight in here, covered in this black mess, all grease and all sorts, dried grease. So I was going to cut it there, but I thought if I can get away with cutting it here, that'd be easier for me to sort out what airlines go where, and for me to disconnect and then all the wiring loom before cutting it. And then once that's cut and I move the rear of the chassis out of the way, I can then get to that to take the transfer box off. Not only that, I can split the prop shaft here and leave that bit on for now. The centre bearing and the prop on, and then that back bit will move back with that. That's my plan. When Ant turns around and says, oh, it's just surface rust, as he does. Chassis rail's 8mm thick. The thickness of that. If you come here, that is about 2mm there. That's all that's left on that point. You can see where it's all delaminated. It's just, see, that's about 6mm there. It's just all the air pipes stripped from the back forward, but I didn't want to cut them because I want to reuse them. Same with all the electrics and what are this side. So this is all the electrics running at the back. So what I'm aiming to do is create a clear patch in the middle where I can just cut it and then get this back half of the chassis out of the way. So the prop shaft is now disconnected from the centre bearing and the front half of the prop. And then if you see that there, clear the spot through here to cut through. I'm going to do a rough cut there first and then work out where the best place to put the join is. I've also got the bend in the chassis to contend with. Now, I'd much rather have the join on the straight bit, so I didn't have to, like this side of the kink, so I didn't have to put the kink in the chassis. But if I have to, I have to. Not the end of the world, just be easier for me if I didn't have to do it. So I know where every pipe goes. You'll see that I've marked it, so I've got A there, C there, D there, B there. And then they have come off. So over here I've got C right on there. And I've marked everything up where it comes off, so I know exactly where everything goes. So over here I'll have A and I'll have B on that valve, so I know they come off of there. You probably would have noticed that I had my phone and the torch going here. Well, I recorded on video as I took off every wire, so I know exactly. I'll just watch that back and I know exactly what number, what colour wire goes to what number in the junction box. So my plan is now cut through here, get rid of that back half, and then I can get to that transfer box easier to remove that afterwards. So the problems with cutting a chassis in half, obviously you don't just want to cut it, because that is likely to stand up on its nose and that back end's likely to drop down there. So it's all about your pivot points on here. So you've got a leaf spring runs up like that, so the engine mounts are about there, so you've got all the weight of the engine that point, so your pivot point is your front axle, so there's a lot of weight on the front there. And then your gearbox mounts are here, so you've got the gearbox about there, and then your engine mount way forward. And then if this cab was down, you'd have the weight of the cab sat on these cab mounts here, so that would be putting weight quite far back. But as I've got it jacked up there, you'll see the weight will be going through the hydraulic rams to there, and then on your pivot point on the front to there. So all that weight is sitting on the front, so I've got to make sure I've got that front blocked up, because that's going to want to try and stand up on end. I'm going to stick an axle stand on that centre bearing of that prop, just in case it comes that way. Don't need too much. And then I'm going to axle stand it. I can already see here, so the pivot point's on here, centre of your axle, front of your spring there. You're going to have probably a good 18 inches past there of weight and the prop shaft pulling down on there. Here you've got less than a foot and you've got an air bottle and that, so I'll stick something under the back, but I don't think it's going to go backwards, and then I'll put a couple of stands under there. Now the next problem with cutting, which a lot of people don't go by, and I'll show you. So my method for cutting, I'll sweep all the floor up, get the floor clear, then I'll go underneath and I'll cut the bottom. Always cut the bottom flange first on both sides. So I'll do this side, I'll go over the other side, and I'll cut through there as well. And when I've done that, I'll cut the top flange and the top flange. So that will just leave this surface here not cut. Well, that alone will hold this weight. So you can come out and you can cut, probably from the bottom I'd cut up to that much, and then from here I'd cut down to it, and I'll do that. So if that does drop for any reason, you're not laying underneath it when it happens. You can be here at the side, and if you've got to come away from that, you can come away and keep yourself as safe as possible. That is the reason. Now when I cut the flanges on these channels, I'll go from inside out. So I noticed many years ago when I started doing these, if you cut from the outside in, that'll always nip your blade up there, because these are almost sprung under tension. Now I don't know whether it's the flex in the chassis or what, but I'll show you here. If you cut that way, it slowly relieves the tension to that point. But if you come that way, all of a sudden it's holding tension, then that just flicks and nips your blade, shatters your disc. I've got an axle stand under there, which is on the bottom of the centre bearing, which is on that cross member. I don't think there'll be any weight come this way, it's all going to go that way if anything. I've got this little stupid, but it's rated at 2-ton axle stand here and a jack there, taking the weight from there. At the back I've got a ramp pedestal and a block of wood, just in case it goes back, which I don't believe it will. And then under the front, where I think all the weight's going to throw, I've got 2 50-ton axle stands under there. Reason messing around with stupid little axle stands and whatnot is, over on Kyle's chassis we've got the heavy duty axle stands propping it up, and then over on the 144 engine we've got the axle stands holding the engine up on there. So ideally I'd want them. So Kyle, hurry up, build your truck so I can get on.
Look at me interjecting on your channel, sorry. So now you just got to put them on there and then take everything off that and put onto them.
Kinda. Yeah. Them holes in there aren't in the correct location for these spring hangers, of course.
Handy.
Not particularly.
So that means the old mag drill will have to come out.
The old mag drill's coming out of play. Take prop shaft off the PTO pump that comes all the way down there to the bottom of the transfer box. Get the transfer box off and that cross member. Don't need that anymore. That's done. No. Oh, that's got to go. Gonzo.
Oh shit! On that bombshell, I'm off.
Just like that. So that is the chassis ready. So the chassis rails that I've got aren't as long as I'd really like. So I think I wanted 3.5 metres in the ideal world. However, I've got to 833. Now I'm going to that line. Yes, I know I could come here, but I could be that cut out. But I'd rather not risk it because that's going to be right on the joint of the chassis. So there's going to be a lot of flex go through there. So I'd rather just do away at that altogether, cut through there. So that's the length chassis rail I got. I was going to put the joint right up here. So strip that off, strip all that off, that cross member out, clean it all, because that is where the good chassis is. Now we've got a bit of rust here, but as Ant likes to say, that's only surface rust. Now Ant did say it was all surface rust. Here we've got probably 8mm thickness steel on that. Now if I take you over to the chassis, it's got holes all the way through. Deal with this rust here. As I say, it's just surface rust, so I'll probably get the old needler scale on it and just take that back and then treat it. I think I'm going to give this chassis a proper coat in a red oxide and then top coat it with a bit of Scania chassis grey. Put a bevel on it all the way around the outside, and then I'll put a bevel on the inside. Don't know if the camera's really picking up them bevels or not. A bit tricky. I'll pick it up from the end, because that's going to get fully welded both sides and then grind off flat. And then there's going to be a flitch plate inside there that comes past, be a flitch plate in there, come past, and then inside here, that come here, so that'll all be bolted through. Extra stiffener really, so it'll be a smaller chassis rather than that 45 DOF, so you're not putting any extra stress on the first point of the inner flitch. So this chassis rail was off what I believe was a rigid that probably had air suspension on it, not a steel leaf springs. So I've got no holes, no correct holes for the spring hanger, the spring helpers. So I've got to put all that in there. So I've spent a lot of time measuring up. See this centre line here? That's the centre line of the spring hanger. So we'll be able to pick up some here. I've got to put a couple bolts, holes in here for the hanger, and then that picks up there. Now the other thing you may notice is the overhang from the rear of the spring hanger there to that. So that's where the back toolbox sits on of the fire truck. Sits on that frame there and bolts through the bottom. Now I can just move that up, which I'm going to have to do because my chassis rail was that short. I had to gain it from somewhere, so I've looked at that, I've worked out I can move that back, that's not a problem. So your spring hanger is going to be here, and then your drop arm will be right on the end. I've got to cut these down on the lines. So I've cut them down, I prepped them, put a bevel on the outside, the inside to match them. Now normally on a wheelbase modification, you cut the chassis. Obviously if you're doing a reduction, you'll cut a lump out the chassis, wheel it up because you'll wind the brake chambers up, so you're actually using the axle to help you move it. And then you can move it up, you align it all. What you do, you put your inner flitches in, and then your inner flitches will have the right hole centres to allow for that reduction. So you put the bolts in, that gets you roughly right, and then you start squaring the chassis, and then you're doing your wheelbases, making sure everything's right, measure it about 58,000 times to make sure it's spot on, and then you have to eye it through. See if I can explain this to you. you've got to also make sure there's not a twist in it. So you could weld it so it's level there, but it might be on a twist there. So what you can do is put a straight edge across the chassis there, one across the back, and then you can eye it through, and then make sure they're sitting perfectly level, and then you know there's no twist in it. So the problem I've currently got is I've got to make that with them chassis rails, that axle. New cross members needed. So Ant's sourced some from Nipper. I think Nipper's got some cross members, so I'm waiting for them. So what I'll do is I'll stand them up, I'll make a what I call a ladder frame with the cross members in, and then ideally I'd like to take the axle off of that, bolt it to the underside of the ladder frame, and then I can push it up, wheel it, align it. I think that'd be better. But I can't do that till I've got cross members. So I think what I'm going to do, I'd like to, all the holes I do have to drill in here, I'd like to do it on the flat surface here. I've got mag drill, so that'll stick on, drill through. That's not a problem. What I'm going to do while I'm waiting for my cross members then is I need to cut these off. Now, I'm not entirely sure they're exactly the same front and back. They do look it. They do look the same. So what I might do, I think that one's going to be easiest. They're rivets. So what you can do is you can either grind the heads off, punch them through, but they take a lot of punching, so you can grind the head off, drill a hole through, but not all the way through. Just go through the thickness of the chassis and then hit it out the rest. Or you can do what I'm probably going to do, get the gas bottles and just take the heads off, and then I'll take that pin out, take that pin out, and then I'll have that whole casting that I can just move around, and I can line that up on the centre marks. I'll line it up, make sure, drill it through, make sure that's right, and then I'll have the distance from the centre of the back one to the centre of the front one, so I can go from centre to centre, hold that on, drill all that out, so I know that's all going to be spot on. Now I think some of these holes are going to be a bit close, so I might have to weld some holes up. I personally don't like having holes closer than 50mm together on a chassis because it causes weak points. I'd go 40mm top and bottom, 50mm width. However, looks like Scania's not too fussed on that theory. Yeah, Scania's working to 35mm. So, if that's good enough for Scania, that's good enough for me. I'm going to try and get this pin out first, and then that. That grease pipe out. Well, it looks like a 21mm bolt head and a 19mm socket. There you go. Pinch bolt removed. Well, that's going easier than I thought. So no doubt something's going to go wrong in a minute. Oh, there you go. Look at that. You can tell it's had auto lube fitted because everything's coming out as it should do in there. Don't ever stick your finger in there like I just did. So the auto lube goes in that little fit in there, the pipe. So it goes on the little turny part at the top, it's full of grease, and it pumps it around the whole system. And then in the middle of your pin, I don't know if you see that, you've got a hole, both sides, where the grease comes out. So I dare say that's why that was as easy to come out as it is. Quite thankful for that one. Right, it's time to fire the oxyacetylene. I keep calling it oxyacetylene, but it's not. It's oxypropane. Pretty much same thing. Gonna cut the rivet heads off. It's a shame we didn't have a fire engine really, isn't it? Trying to put the rivets there at the back so I don't damage the hanger, but I don't know what's in there, but it's highly flammable. Look who's just turned up. It's old Ploddy. Ploddy! What you say, boy?
Not a lot.
Right, I've done the hard part. I've cut the rivets off. Yep. You do the easy bit there.
Oh, okay.
That'll do as my pattern. Oh, as I said to camera earlier, where I mount my leaf spring hangers on, the holes are a bit close to the existing ones. And when I say a bit close, there was a lot less than what factory were. So weld them up, keep the strength in it, plug them both sides, I'll let that cool down, and then I'll grind that off flat. There's a busy man. I feel like I've got a workshop supervisor. Tea break.